In this lesson, I will teach you something called constructor flow. See, I have a class called constructor flow and a main method is only to create the what objects. See, basically what I'll do, I will have class A and let's say class B and let's say class C. So I have three classes here. See, I created a file called constructor_flow.java and I created a class called constructor flow. And in the same Java file itself, I'm creating these classes only to what give the example quickly. But if you are writing a professional code, then related classes should be in the related files. So know this one and work according to that. So what I'll do here, I will. We already know about the constructor. I'll just create an what the plain word constructor which we said earlier. So now we know that one is not a default constructor. It is basically an what explicit constructor without parameter. So we know that one in this we can have if I have any data members and all, then let's say if I have int I and let's say int j. So now if I create an object of a, so how do you do that? We say let's say a obj1 equal to new a. So now what happens when we instantiate after the new keyword is executed, when the constructor is invoked, what this constructor will do? So this basically will call this. In this we can have some statements. In this we can have some statements to initialize I and j. But if I don't have any statements, obviously they will get initialized with what default values. Since they are numeric data types, then they'll get initialized with 0. But I'm not going to do any initialization here. I just want you to understand the flow of the execution of constructor in inheritance. So I will simply have one println statement which says I am a. Same way, I will create a constructor for B. Let's call it as I am B. Now, same way, a constructor in class C, call it as I am C. Now you see, if I execute this statement now, what is the output we see? We see since the object is created, since this constructor is invoked, we see the output as I am A. Let's go ahead and compile and execute it once. Java C constructor flow.java Java constructor flow. So I am A. So we are creating an object here. So when this is invoked, so this will call this method, that is a special method, that is a constructor. So there we are having the println statement. That is exactly the reason, since it is invoked during the object creation process, we see the output like this. Now again I go back to my code. What I'll do now, I will create an object of B. How do I do that? And B. Now again the same program, if I compile and if I execute, I say the output as A, I am A, I am B. This object creation is printing I am A, this object creation is printing I am B. Now you see this, I go and make one small modification here. B extends A. So what happens now? What do we see? I am seeing I am A and I am B. So this is the first statement, but the second statement is printing these two, the object creation of B. Why it is happening like that? Simple reason. When we create an object of the subclass, what this will do? This guy will call the constructor of superclass. First it will call. Then first here what happens here? Calling the constructor of superclass. That is A in this case. Get the point? So I'll create one more object now. I'll say C obj3 equal to C. Let me delete these two. So now what happens? It will come here. The same thing happens. Calling the constructor of superclass. That is B in this case. Now when it goes here, this is calling the constructor of superclass. So it will come here. So this will execute. but this will not call the constructor of, this is the supermost class. A is the supermost class, but A's superclass is object class. A superclass is what? It is object class. We studied in the last class that if a class A do not extend any class at all, then if there is a class which do not extend any other class, then all those such classes will all by implicitly inherited object class. But here what happens? But the constructor of object class is not called. So in the constructor flow, what happens? If you are instantiating a subclass, that subclass constructor will call the constructor of superclass. Again, if it is a subclass of some other class, it will call the constructor of superclass. But if you have a class which do not extend any class, when we create the constructor of that, by default, implicitly it inherits object class. However, this will not call the constructor of object class. Let's compile this and execute. Oh, only I am C. What is that? C. Okay, sorry, I forgot to add extends B. So now what happens? So C constructor is calling B's constructor, B constructor is calling A constructor. Then whatever the statements are there in A constructor gets executed, then the control come to B, then the control come to C. So why it happens like this? Why exactly the process is going like this? Why they have made it like this? Simple reason. See, when you instantiate C, the C has inherited whatever is present in the B. Whatever is present in the B has been inherited. As in, the copy of the members which are there in the B will not come to C. It will be there only. The constructor of that class is responsible for initializing the data members belongs to that class. So what they have done, they find a workaround, that is, they decided to call the constructor of B in C. That is, they decided to call the constructor of superclass in the subclass, except the object class. For all the remaining, the user defined class, whatever we create, for all of them, the superclass constructor is called. So what happens if the B has some data member, let's say int, let's say x and int y. What B will do? B will initialize xy. Again, same way, C if it is having something called int, let's say boolean flag. So the constructor of C will initialize the flag, and constructor of B will initialize its data members, that is xy. Then constructor of A will initialize its data member, that is ij. So when we inherit it, if there's a constructor which is defining its own user defined values for their own data members, then we get those such things as output. Say for example, let's say I will say println, I'll say obj3 dot, let's pick up. So even the I is inherited, isn't it? B inherits ij and C inherits B, that is ij has been inherited to C also. So I'll print the value of I. But here what I'll do in this constructor, I will assign the value I equal to, let's say 1000. So what happens now? We get the output as 1000, which is initialized in the constructor of A. Output is 1000, which is initialized in the, I'll simply say in the constructor A. Makes sense? So let me compile and execute this. We are getting the output as 1000.